morning, everyone. My name is Jeline Buengumanoy and Miss Cyralyn Alcano, Miss Christine Angkla, and Miss Clarissa Suete are with me to discuss the topic Learners with Difficulty Remembering and Focusing. So, this topic will allow us to learn about students with difficulty in remembering lessons, concepts, and instructions. Also, it included in this topic those students who find it a challenge to sustain their focus. So please hear us out as we go through this topic. So if you guys do know someone who had difficulty in writing, reading, or trouble in performing and following social conventions, more like behavior problems, that someone might have a learning disability. So before anything else, let us have the definition first. So the International Classification of Functioning, Disability, and Health of the World Health Organization provides definitions of specific mental functions and focusing. So we do have memory functions and attention functions. So memory functions includes short-term memory, long-term memory, and retrieval, while attention functions include sustaining, shifting, dividing, and sharing information. So SunTrack 2011 provides a description of each of these functions to better understand this concept, as it is necessary to have a clear picture of how to enable learners with such difficulties to succeed and how to provide support in an inclusive setting. So here is a definition of memory and attention functions. So in memory functions, it involves encoding, storage, and retrieval of information over time. So first in the list is the short-term memory. So in short-term memory, it only has the capacity to recall a small amount of information from a recent period of time, approximately 30 seconds only. For example, remembering a six-digit verification code that appears in your phone, where you just need a moment to be able to write it down. So if you do not use any strategies to integrate it into your long-term memory, it will get lost or fade out in your memory. So you will forget that information. Then the second one is long-term memory. So obviously from the word itself, long-term memory, it is a mental resources that follow for storing information for a long period of time. So these two, short-term memory and long-term memory, are just like in computers, where short-term memory is what we call the RAM, or the random memory is what we call the hard disk drive, where it maintains stored information. So going back to the last one in a memory functions, which is the retrieval, where Sandrock defined it as a mental resources used to recall information stored in the long-term memory. Then the next is we have the attention function. So it does involve focusing of mental resources on a stimulus for a required time period. So we have first the sustained attention. So sustained attention is a mental resources used to maintain attention for an extended period of time, also called vigilance. For example, staying focused while reading a new chapter of your favorite Wattpad story without any interruptions until it is finished. So that is an example of sustained memory. The second one is the selective attention. It is a mental resources that allow an individual to select and focus on a specific stimulus that is important while ignoring others. For example, focusing on the voice of the lecturer amidst the noise of a group. So rather than focusing on the noise in the background, you chooses to give your attention to the lecturer. So it's about turning out other distractions and paying attention to what is important. So that is selective attention. The last one is dividing attention. So compared to selective attention where you only focus on a specific object, dividing attention involves focusing on one or more activity or task simultaneously. For example is kanang listening to music while cooking, or listening to music while cleaning the house, or eating snacks while watching TV, or eating snacks while babysitting. So like that, that's dividing attention. So if students do have a difficulty onto what I have mentioned, the memory and the attention functions, there's a possibility that they do have a learning disability or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So let us have the definition, identification, and learning characteristics of these disabilities. Number one is LD, or learning disability. So it was Samuel Kirk who coined the term learning disability when he met the parents and families as they discussed about the students who encountered pronounced difficulties in school despite having average to above average intelligence. So learning disabilities are disorders that affect the ability to understand or use spoken or written language, do mathematical calculations, coordinate movements, and direct attention. He further describes students with learning disabilities as a heterogeneous mix of learners who all had neurologically based problems that affected their learning in different ways. So, to better understand, Gargiulo 2012 provided common components of the definitions of learning disability. We have here first the intellectual functioning with normal range. So this refers to the general mental ability that includes reasoning, planning, problem solving, abstract thinking, comprehending complex ideas, learning quickly, and learning from experiences. So intellectual functioning is commonly measured by the intelligence quotient, or IQ. Then the next is significant gap or discrepancy between a student's assumed potential and actual achievement. So like it refers to the output, not to the unequal or incompatibility of expected students' results. Then the next is the interference that learning disability is not primarily caused by other disabilities or extrinsic factors. Then difficulty in learning in one or more academic areas. And the last one is presumption of central nervous system, or CNS dysfunction. So these components are also found in the definition provided by the National Joint Commission on Learning Disabilities. So learning disabilities is a general term that refers to a heterogeneous group of disorders manifested by significant difficulties in the acquisition and use of listening, speaking, reading, writing, reasoning, or mathematical abilities. So these disorders are intrinsic to the individual, presumed to be due to central nervous system dysfunction, and may occur across the lifespan. So, problems in self regulatory behaviors, social perception, and social interaction may exist with learning disabilities, but do not by themselves constitute a learning disability. Although learning disabilities may occur concomitantly with other disabilities, for example, sensory impairment, intellectual disabilities, and emotional disturbance, or with extrinsic influences such as cultural or linguistic differences, insufficient or inappropriate instructions, they are not the results of those conditions, or influences. So, what is trying to say here is that learning disabilities do not occur just because you are blind, deaf, or etc., but because of the abnormality in the nervous system, either in the structure of the brain or in the functioning of brain chemicals. So uh, the difference in the nervous system causes the child with a learning disorder to receive, process, or communicate information in a different way. Also, the learning disability can be genetics or happened after birth or caused by early childhood illnesses, accidents, and seizures. So the term learning disability is a general term under which other difficulties are subsumed. So it is differentiated from specific learning disability. So there are different types of specific learning disabilities for each type of difficulty, namely dyslexia disability that was shown in the movie that we had watched, which is the Every Child is Special, the dysgraphia, and dyscalculia. So dyslexia is characterized by difficulties with accurate and fluent word recognition, and by poor spelling and word reading abilities that result from a deficit in phonological processing abilities. So the difficulties of this learning disability are often unexpected in relation to other cognitive abilities and the provision of effective classroom instruction. So, limited vocabulary and background knowledge, as well as problems in reading comprehension, it may result as a secondary consequences. Next is dyscalculia. It is a specific learning disability that affects how students acquire and develop their arithmetic skills despite average intelligence, and may manifest as a difficulty in retrieval of math facts and understanding numbers or concepts, symbols, or functions. So dyscalculia is difficulties for math computation, no? Like problem solvings and analysis. Then the last one is the dysgraphia, which is for difficulties with handwriting and written expressions, resulting from problems in organizing and putting thoughts on paper. So those are the three types of specific learning disabilities for each type of difficulty. So now that we are done defining the LD or learning disability, let's proceed to ADHD or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So this one will be tackled by Miss Ceraline Alcano. Miss Alcano?
Yes, Miss Gumanoy, thank you. So, as you guys already know what is learning disability or LD, let's move on to ADHD. So, what is ADHD? Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder or ADHD is one of the most common neurodevelopmental disorders of childhood. It is usually first diagnosed in childhood and often lasts into adulthood. ADHD is marked by an ongoing pattern of inattention and or hyperactivity, impulsivity that interferes with functioning or development. People with ADHD experience an ongoing pattern of the following types of symptoms. So the first symptoms is inattention. Inattention means a person may have difficulty staying on task, sustaining focus, and staying organized. And these problems are not due to defiance or lack of comprehension. For example, frequent daydreaming, lost in another world, or easily sidetracked by what's going on around. The next one is hyperactivity, means a person may seem to move about constantly, including in situations when it is not appropriate or excessively fidgets, taps, or talks. In adults, hyperactivity may mean extreme restlessness or talking too much. For example, in schoolwork, appearing forgetful or losing things, being unable to stick to tasks that are tedious or time consuming. Then the third one, impulsivity. Impulsivity means a person may act without thinking or have difficulty with self-control. Impulsivity could also include a desire for immediate rewards or the inability to delay gratification. An impulsive person may interrupt others or make important decisions without considering long-term consequences. Impulsivity is the tendency to act without thinking. For example, if you blurt something out, buy something you had not planned to, or run across the street without looking. DSM-5, American Psychiatric Association 2013, provides the diagnostic criteria for ADHD, which include inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity, and a combination of the two. For a child to be diagnosed with ADHD, the observed behaviors should meet the following criteria. First, display a persistent pattern for at least 6 months that significantly interferes with functioning or development. Second, observe in two or more settings at home, school, work, with friends or relatives, and in other activities. Several of the symptoms were present before the age of 12 years. And the last one, the behaviors are not resulting from other disorders, such as schizophrenia, anxiety disorder, personality disorder, and etc. So, these are the signs of ADHD in accordance to the three types of symptoms, which is impulsivity, hyperactivity, and inattention. So, students with inattention symptoms of ADHD does not pay attention to details and work in a haphazard manner resulting in careless mistakes. It could be school tasks, at work, in other activities. They also find it difficult to sustain attention in tasks, easily distracted and sidetracked by extraneous stimuli, often does not follow through on instruction, and fails to finish schoolwork, chores, or duties in the workplace, appears not to listen or distracted when spoken to directly, has difficulty following instructions resulting in unfinished work, shows a tendency to be forgetful in daily tasks and routines, has problems in organizing tasks and activities, and the last tends to lose things that are needed for schoolwork and other activities. So that's all for the inattention symptoms. So hyperactivity and impulsivity. So students with hyperactivity and impulsivity of ADHD, often restless and fidgety, and cannot seem to stay while sitting down, often stands from seat to room around the room, often runs around or climbs in situations when a setting is required, often, often rather talkative, interrupts in conversations, and blurts responses. Find it difficult to wait for one's turn in tasks and activities, impulsive with words and actions, and they also struggle in following instructions and rushes through tasks. So that's all for the hyperactivity and impulsivity symptoms. So now let's proceed to the identification. Identifying students with LD and ADHD begins with the parents and teachers. The presence of difficulties and mental functions provided in the table 6.8 and the behaviors enumerated in the table 6.9, as well as meeting the provided criteria for persistence and consistency in more than one setting. may create the impetus for parents to consult specialists and for teachers to apply free referral strategies before referring the students for special education testing. Okay, so first is LD or learning disability. So learning disabilities are disorders that affect the ability to understand or use spoken or written language, do mathematical calculations, coordinate movements, and direct attention. In identifying students with LD, a discrepancy or difference between academic achievement and intelligence needs to be established using tests that measure intelligence and standard achievement tests. So, children with LD oftentimes display average to above average intelligence but perform below the grade placement in achievement tests of reading, spelling, math, and written expression. In addition to the use of clinical testing, what teachers can provide is initial information about a student's patterns of abilities and difficulties. So, conducting student observations, interviews, and error analysis of schoolwork will provide a supplementary information needed to determine ways to help a child who may be at risk or have signs of learning disability. A clinical or educational psychologist or a special education diagnostician use all available data from born reference tests, teachers' observations, analysis of achievement tests, and parent interview to determine if the learning difficulties may be attributed to the presence of a learning disability. So, to create a holistic picture of the learners and observations and interviews with parents and teachers are essential. So, let's move on to ADHD. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is a condition that affects people's behavior. So, there are four components that are needed in identifying students with ADHD. So, these are the medical examination, clinic interviews, use of teacher and parent rating scales, and behavioral observations. So, let's have first the medical examinations. Medical examinations needed to rule out the presence of sensory impairments or middle ear infection that can cause hearing problems. So, ADHD screening is important because individuals can seek the correct treatment once they have a diagnosis to assess problems of attention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity that the child is currently experiencing. It also assesses the severity of these problems and to gather information about other disabilities that may be contributing to the child's ADHD symptoms. So, other medical conditions such as seizure disorders, brain tumors, and thyroid problems that may be the underlying cause of the inattentive and hyperactive behaviors also need to be ruled out. Okay, so let's move to the clinical interview. A clinical interview is a tool that helps physicians, psychologists, and researchers make an accurate diagnosis of a variety of mental illnesses. Clinical interview with the parents provides the specialist with a holistic perspective of the child and essential information about the student's physical and psychological characters, family and cultural background, and peer relationships. So, this ecological approach and assessment is necessary to rule out other contributing factors, like drastic changes in the family dynamics, such as separation of parents, unexpected deaths, and others that may be causing the observed behaviors of inattention and hyperactivity. So, next is teacher and parent rating scales. Teacher and parent rating scales are used as additional tools to provide evidence for the student's inattention, hyperactivity, and a combination of the two. Authoritative diagnostic manuals and practice guidelines. They recommended aggregating information for diagnostic purposes across informants and settings, in particular from the home and school settings, with information typically derived from parents and teachers. Standardized rating scales such as the Conners rating scales are used by clinical psychologists, psychologists and special education diagnosticians to identify the presence of ADHD in a student. So the rating scale measures the following behaviors: hyperactivity, aggressive behavior, violent tendencies, compulsive behaviors, perfectionism, difficulty in class, extra trouble with math, difficulty with language, social issues, emotional distress, and separation anxiety. So, this was in line to the first criteria for a child to be diagnosed with ADHD. The teachers' and parents' responses to the rating scales are based on their daily observations about the students' behaviors for the past 6 months in the respective settings like home, school, or workplace. So that's all for my first part. So now that we are done with the definition and identification of LD and ADHD, let's proceed to the learning characteristics. And I think Miss Clarissa Spetty will be the one to further discuss this subsequent section.
Yes, you are right, Miss Alcano. Thank you. So now let's proceed to the learning characteristics. Oftentimes, learning characteristics refers to the difficulties and challenges experienced by students with LD and ADHD. While these are also essential to determine possible accommodations and interventions, it is equally important to present their strengths and abilities alongside their challenges, as this can be used to help create a positive niche for students. So when we say positive niche, it is a strength-based approach to educating students with disabilities. Students with LD are known to have challenges in language, literacy, and memory, as well as in math, writing, and focusing or attending skills. Nonetheless, it is important to note that these are merely general characteristics, as there are individual differences in terms of abilities and difficulties among children with LD and ADHD. In language development, they often display delays in learning how to speak, have difficulties in naming objects and retrieving words from memory, and have limited vocabulary in comparison to typically developing peers. Students with LD oftentimes struggle with having to organize their thoughts, that they are unable to use precise words to express their ideas. On the other hand, there are students with LD who are better at oral expression in relation to their reading and writing skills. Such students are better at expressing themselves at times rather fluently, but are unable to transfer their thoughts to writing. In terms of reading skills, students with dyslexia display delays and difficulties in phonological processing, word reading or decoding, spelling, and oral reading fluency. Fundamental to reading is phonological awareness, or the knowledge that all words can be segmented into phonemes, or sounds, and that the letters in a written word correspond to these sounds. Individuals with dyslexia have poor phonological awareness that subsequently impedes word reading ability, fluency, and accuracy. This basic weakness then blocks access to higher order language processes and to gaining meaning from text. Thus, problems with comprehension may be attributed to inaccurate decoding and lack of oral reading fluency, but they can use higher level skills of vocabulary, reasoning, problem solving, concept formation, and general intelligence. To a certain extent, their reading skills may be compared with younger children who are at the beginning reading level. Oral reading fluency tends to be unlaborious. Others reading in a word-by-word fashion, at times substituting words and lacking in proper intonation or expression due to poor decoding skills, sight word vocabulary. So this is the table 6.10, represent the sample oral reading and spelling of a student with dyslexia. So from original text to the student's oral reading, and from the words to the student's spelling. So from the original text, a man got out of the car. He had a pretty box under his arm. A little girl ran from the house to meet the man. "Hello, father," she said. "Do you have a surprise for me?" The father said, "I have something for a poor girl." And the girl laughed, "I am very good." While the student's oral reading, Inaman got out of the car. He had a pet on his arm. A little girl ran from the house to meet him. "Hello, father," she said. "Do you have a sharp for me?" The father said, "I have something for you, that girl." And the girl lit her. "I have give good." The words will, arms, dress, train, shout, watch, and grow. While the student's spelling, well, arm, breast, tran, shout, watch, and go. So it is expected that the students will not be able to understand the passage well because of all the substitution errors unless he or she uses her or his prior knowledge and experience revolving around the story. In terms of written language, students with LD have tendencies to reverse letters or words, have poor spelling skills, and display difficulties in the quality, organization, sentence fluency, and application of writing conventions, including handwriting, spelling, and grammar, as well as motivation to write. As for math skills, the difficulties manifest in relation to students' age and grade. For instance, students in the first grade level have problems in the retrieval of basic math facts and computing exercises, while older children display severe difficulties in learning the multiplication table and understanding algorithms of the four basic operations, which are the addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Moreover, they are known to have incomplete or inadequate procedural knowledge of algorithms, which are reflected in the way they misuse or substitute arithmetic sign, forgetting to regroup, misplacing digits, not following the proper alignments of digits when solving, or solving from left to right. As a result, students with LD struggles with more complex math equations and problems as they lack the foundation arithmetic skills. Moreover, students with LD also display problems with short-term and working memory, like mental resources used to retain information while simultaneously engaged in another activity. Deficits in metacognition display attention problems and hyperactivity. As a result, they often have trouble focusing on tasks, exhibit excess movement, restlessness, and fidget behaviors that are characteristics of students with ADHD. Because of these difficulties in executive functioning, students with LD and ADHD are known to be forgetful of daily activities and routines, can be disorganized with their personal belongings and even schedules, and have problems monitoring comprehension. Parents complain about having to buy a new set of pens and pencils every week because their children tend to lose them easily. Adults tend to be frustrated because such learners seem to be forgetful and or absent-minded, and they need to be constantly reminded of chores and other daily routines, which typically developing learners would have already remembered easily. Moreover, due to their impulsivity, students with ADHD exhibit academic underachievement as well as disruptive behavior that impact on family and peer relationship. Anchoring on neurodiversity, children with LD and ADHD also have their strengths and abilities amidst such difficulties and limitations. Students with LD are known to have strong artistic abilities and visual spatial skills. As a result, they oftentimes display unusual skills in drawing, doing mechanical puzzles, as well as in building models. Moreover, they are known to be creative, divergent thinkers, imaginative, and highly curious. For instance, a famous person with dyslexia is Charles Schwab, founder of Charles Schwab Corporation, who attributed his success to his dyslexia. He had only learned that he had dyslexia when he was 40 years old, after his son was diagnosed with the same condition. Despite being excellent in economics and business, he narrated that he would sound out words to understand them when he was younger and that he would still struggle in being understanding books about topics unfamiliar to him. But because of his dyslexia, he was able to think of out-of-the-box solution. In relation to this, Shaywitz 2003 presented a Sea of Strengths model of dyslexia, where weakness in decoding is compensated through other strengths such as reasoning, concept formation, comprehension, general knowledge, problem solving, vocabulary, critical thinking, and reasoning abilities. This is the reason why students with dyslexia are oftentimes active in class recitations and projects, but struggle with literacy tasks that involve reading and writing stemming from their phonological deficits. So those are the learning characteristics. The last section is about the general education adaptation, which will be tackled by Miss Angla. Miss Angla?
Yes, Miss Wete, thank you so much. So now let's proceed to the general educational adaptations. The use of universal design for learning or the UDL principles such as providing multiple means of representations, expression, engagement are effective for all types of learners and provide a level playing field for students with learning disorder, specific learning disorder, and ADHD or the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Through a variety of approaches, students with difficulty remembering and focusing are given opportunities to compensate for their weaknesses and use their strength to learn as much as their typically developing peers. The table shows the application of UDL or the Universal Design for Learning in an inclusive classroom. The first UDL principle is the multiple means of representation. First example is audiobooks alongside real books, multimedia presentations and videos to supplement textbooks, math manipulative materials and illustration to reinforce lessons, hands-on experiences, use of multi-sensorial activities in addition to teacher talk. Next is the use of reading materials that include rich visual representation in the form of photos, graphic organizer, diagrams, and etc. The second UDL principle is the multiple means of expression. In addition to traditional measures of assessment, provide variety of ways to demonstrate understanding of concepts or lessons. And here are some examples of multiple means of expression. First is the debate, build models, experimentation, digital audio presentations, writing activities, portfolio assessment, photograph pictures, blogs, and lastly, draw pictures. Use graphic organizer to illustrate concept or content. The third UDL principle is the multiple means of engagement. Provide varied activities to support student engagement through hands-on, kinesthetic activities, plays, drama, dance, simulation games, role-playing, discussion and debates, and give opportunity for students' choice. Example is range of reading materials and activities. Last is use of inquiry-based learning and project-based approach. In addition to UDL, or the Universal Design for Learning, an approach that has been proven to be effective for students with memory and focusing difficulties is the use of explicit instruction of literary skills, comprehension, and writing strategies. Such approach uses a step-by-step instruction that includes modeling, providing guided practice as well as independent practice, while giving immediate corrective feedback so students will understand what and how to improve. Part of this approach is the use of think aloud to model concrete steps in problem solving, such as how to attack unfamiliar word, how to begin a writing task or essay through brainstorming, and how to begin answering a math word problem. Does anyone have a questions? If none, so let's proceed. What is dyslexia? Dyslexia is a learning disorder that involves difficulty in reading due to problems identifying speech sounds and learning how they relate to letters and words. This is also called as the reading disability. Students with dyslexia and struggling readers benefits from the direct explicit approach in phonological processing, phonics instructions, and spelling rules. Because of the reading and spelling difficulties, learning through mere visual approach will not be effective. They may remember the words now. As they process in their short-term memory, they forget them by tomorrow because the words will not longer be stored in their long-term memory, and along with their accompanying difficulties. Moreover, planning the classroom environment and how routines are being implemented is equally important in an inclusive classroom. Because students with a learning disorder and ADHD show a tendency to be restless, become hyperactive, and have a short attention spans. Providing a classroom that is highly structured and with a clear expectation is essential. Class rules and norms, agreements, routines, as well as the schedules need to be written and accompanied by a clear and simple images. This needs to be explained, displayed, and implemented consistently to make the classroom environment structured and safe for all our students or our children. One intervention that has been reported to be effective in helping students with ADHD is the use of DRC or the Daily Report Card, which is an individualized intervention to manage target behavior of our child. This begins with a assessment through the observation and the teacher and parent interviews to determine the specific behavior of our child that needs to manage or to develop. Once it is identified, the target behaviors are framed positively, and teachers will monitor the students' progress on the DRC or the daily report card throughout the day by recording whether the targets have been met. A assessment of reinforcement and consequences is developed with the child. Reinforcement can be a form of a tangible reward such as sticker, stamp, and puzzle, and etc. But they can also be opportunities to do certain activities in school, such as having extra time in the classroom or library, having an extra book to borrow, being the leader for the day, being a teacher's lunch buddy, and other activities. Parents are also included in the planning and implementation to promote homeschool communication and collaboration.
Thank you, Miss Angla. So for the last part, these are the following types of accommodation and supports for students with difficulty remembering and focusing. So the first type of accommodation is presentation. So these provide the following: audio files to supplement a slide presentation, bigger font sizes in reading materials and worksheets, leveled books that match students' reading level, audiobooks and or have peer read aloud the selection, digital text that provides word meanings, advanced organizers to serve as guide during lectures, preview of vocabulary or key points to provide the big picture, active involvement in class, use graphic organizers and mind mapping techniques for note taking during class, and explain and write directions step by step while making sure that students is attentive and listening. So, accommodations are changes to educational environments or practices designed to help students with difficulties to overcome learning barriers that results to their difficulties. So, presentation accommodation change the way that instruction, direction, and information are presented. These accommodations allow a student with disability of focusing to access the information in the ways that the standard visual or auditory means, such as by reading or listening. They provide support that allows students with disabilities of difficulty in focusing to access the same instructional opportunities like the other students. So the next one is response. This allows students to use the following: use text to speech software to facilitate writing, use words processor with spelling and grammar check, waive incorrect spelling in specific subjects. Note: do not mark misspelling as incorrect provided content is accurate. Graphic organizers as a pre-writing task, and math supports. So, math supports such as calculation devices or calculator, concrete material and manipulatives, chart or math facts and formula, special paper with grids for computations. So this allows students to complete activities, assignments, and assessments in different ways, or to solve or organize problems using some type of assistive device or organizer. Okay, so the third one is setting. So for the accommodation and support, we have professional setting, which means away from sources of distraction. Then play appropriate background music through individual earphones while studying. Allow students to move or run around a few times before class or between classes. So this is an alteration of environment. Curriculum format or equipment that allows an individual or students to gain access to content and complete assigned tasks. They allow students to pursue the regular course of study. The fourth one is scheduling. So for the support, they provide extended time, break tasks into sections, time limits for assessments and countdown, and allow for quick breaks to move around and stretch in activities. So timing and scheduling accommodations allow for changes to how time is organized. These adjustments often reduce students' frustration and fatigue, thereby allowing them the opportunity to access and demonstrate their learning. Then the last but not the least, behavior management. So the support includes teach self-talk skills, teach physical relaxation techniques such as mindful breathing, use quiz balls to release tensions, and allow students to doodle while listening to lecture. Having a behavior management plan in place can improve the school environment and reduce student issues. So, behavior management helps to teach students about being respectful to one another, and everyone stands to benefit from this. Effective behavior management will ensure that students' behavior does not disrupt lessons so that the teachers can teach and the students can learn. So that's all for this topic, learners with difficulty remembering and focusing. Thank you so much for your time, for listening and watching. If you have further questions, clarifications, and suggestions, please don't hesitate to ask the reporters.